Good afternoon, Rising. How are you?
Yeah, good afternoon, Sebastian. I'm doing fine. And you?
Doing very well. You're in Nigeria at the moment, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yes, I am Lagos, Nigeria.
Okay, perfect. Tell me, what are three words or numbers or a few sentences that would describe you the best?
Okay, kind of a tricky question, but I like to say first of all, I'm human, so obviously not an alien. And yeah, I'm a software engineer by trade, and also I have the idea that people are actually in charge of their own happiness, kind of like a strong stance to take in my life, but I have that belief and that conviction that everyone is in charge of their own happiness in life. So yeah, I think that's how I can describe myself.
You also told me before, and it's fine, I can cut this if you don't feel comfortable. You said you're also an entertainer. Do you want to share a bit more, a few words about how you're an entertainer? That's original.
Yeah, okay. Entertainer in the sense that I don't know when I'm with friends, I joke. I like to joke around. I like to make people laugh, make people happy. So I like to pull pranks on people, and especially when I'm with people I'm comfortable with. So that's the reason why I said I'm like an entertainer.
Any thoughts about doing stand-up comedy?
Not really. I think I'll be terrible at it.
Okay, that's fair. Let's talk about
Yeah.
technology. Thank you for making the time today. I wanted to chat with you so we can maybe inspire other developers with your journey and the stuff that you've been building. And one
Okay.
of the projects, the open source projects you've been working on, if I'm not mistaken, how do we pronounce it? Is it
Yeah.
danfo.js? Yeah?
Perfect. Downfood.js.
All right. So this is a JavaScript package that's built using TensorFlow.js. Do you want to share more about what that does, what this is about, and how you came about to building or contributing to that project?
Okay. Yeah, so basically I like to define Downfood.js in one phrase. I like to call it the pandas of JavaScript. So for people who are not familiar with pandas, pandas is basically a very popular Python library for working with structured data. Okay. So Danfo is what pandas is in the Python ecosystem. So Danfo is that same library but in JavaScript. So basically, you can use Danfo to analyze and process structured data such as CSV files, Excel files, JSON files. So you can use it to process those data, to analyze them, to basically do wrangling before maybe you can start doing machine learning or data visualization and stuff like that. So basically, that's what Danfo does. And in terms of how we came about the library, because I built it with a friend, Steven. So basically, I think about a year back, I was doing lots of work with TensorFlow.js, and I discovered that there were lots of missing libraries that were not fully formed yet in the JavaScript ecosystem. And that was actually Pandas was like the most important one that we needed. Okay, so I find out that for me to do for me to build machine learning models or do some machine learning jobs in JavaScript environment, I have to process my data. Okay, and for me to process my data, I need access to functions, pandas like functions that will make it easy for me to process this data. And I found out that every time I want to do something like this, I have to rewrite most of these functions. I have to write these functions myself. So I was like, okay, wouldn't it be better if we have like a library like pandas existing in JavaScript? So I searched the net, and the ones I found were really, really outdated, and they were kind of different from pandas in a way. So I talked to my friend Steven, and I found out that he had an idea about designing a pandas like library as well. So I said, okay, let's collaborate on this. So we collaborated on it and started building it. So basically, the idea of building Danfo was actually to help myself first. So, and I found out that people actually wanted something like this. And when we open sourced it, it was welcomed. People have been using it, contributing to it, and that's just the background story behind it.
In what cases would you recommend using the JavaScript language as opposed to Python? Because you're trying to replicate what Pandas is doing. And I have a very selfish reason to ask that question is I'm really bad at Python. I'm a coder on the side and I do my little projects and I love JavaScript. So that's my selfish question. In what cases would you recommend JavaScript as opposed to Python? Or for someone who may not be familiar, which one would you recommend to go into and explore more?
Okay. Yeah, like I always say, I use Python. So I use Python, I use JavaScript. So I have first-hand experience in both. It was because of my knowledge of Python that was how I was able to port the codes into JavaScript. So in terms of ML, Python is more matured right now at the moment. They have lots of libraries, lots of tools, great community around it. And so for JavaScript, it's still a developing community. Okay, lots of tools are not available. So in terms of when to use which of these tools, for me, I say it depends on the problem, depends on what you want to do. Okay, so basically I tend to use TensorFlow.js or Danfo.js when I want to build a particular application that needs maybe a client side, okay, that needs front side. So because JavaScript is very powerful when it comes to client side, so we have access to lots of cool libraries, lots of cool functionalities. So basically, if you feel you can actually combine both together. So sometimes in my projects, I use Python for some part of it, and I use TensorFlow.js and Danfo for another part of it, especially if it is client facing. So there's not really a strong point to say you must use this as opposed to this. I think they kind of like complement each other, such that there are some particular use cases that you might need something more flexible as JavaScript. So you go for that use case. Whilst in some cases, you're definitely going to work with in a Python system. So I think to answer the question, I would say I can't strongly say choose one over the other. I would say they complement each other.
That makes sense. Let's talk about TensorFlow a little bit and TensorFlow.js if you want. Is there anything that surprised you as you used it? Anything that you found particularly easy or particularly hard? And if it was difficult, how did you overcome the challenge of understanding specific aspects of it?
Okay.
Anything that surprised you?
I think in terms of TensorFlow.js, I would say there's a positive surprise to it. I think the positive surprise was the fact that it was actually easy for me to understand because the developers built it in such a way that it was similar to the existing Keras library, TensorFlow Keras library. So it kind of followed the same API. So it was very easy for me to understand. I think also because I had knowledge of JavaScript as well. So with my knowledge of JavaScript, it was easy for me to quickly understand the TensorFlow.js code. So I would say that's a positive surprise for me, as opposed to some other libraries whereby you have to start learning new stuff. The learning curve is kind of high. For TensorFlow.js, it is really low, and it gives you amazing tools out of the box to build awesome stuff. So that is like a positive surprise for me. I say in terms of negative, I don't really think there's a negative because TensorFlow.js is still a pretty young library. So although there are some missing features, some low-level numerical features that are actually missing at the moment, but I'm sure it's definitely part of the roadmap. So it's going to be implemented. So I can't really say there's a negative surprise, just that positive surprise.
If there's no negative surprise, is there something you found challenging, and maybe not with TensorFlow.js, but maybe with the Keras library as you were starting to learn about it before you evolved towards TensorFlow.js? Any specific things that you find challenging and how you overcame that challenge?
To be honest, I can't really say. For me personally, I can't really say there was anything challenging when learning Keras or Tensor because from the onset, I think Keras was designed to be very simple to use. I think that was actually the idea behind building Keras as opposed to using core TensorFlow. Before TensorFlow actually updated to using the Keras API. So, and I started learning Keras. So I think Not really. Not really. For me, I would say not really.
What would be your advice to someone who is starting with TensorFlow? Where would you
Okay.
point them? In which direction would you point them to make it as easy and smooth as it has been to you to start using it? It can be a bit daunting. A lot of people hear about data
Yeah.
science and machine learning and AI, and it seems like a
Yeah.
gigantic black box, including to people who are software engineers, but not at all in that field.
Okay.
What is your advice for people to get started in that area?
Okay, like so for me, in terms of say you want to learn TensorFlow JS or maybe Keras or TensorFlow itself, I normally start from the official documentations. Okay, so basically for learning any new language or any new tool, my first point of contact is always the official documentation. Why? Because it is up to date. So, and I think one advantage about Google's Doc is that they also give you access to code labs. So, and those code labs are step by step, tutorials that you can follow to build like an end-to-end product in those libraries. So for me, the advice is that once you have the basic, maybe because for you to do Keras, for you to use the Keras library or the TensorFlow.js library, you're supposed to have some basic knowledge, maybe in terms of Python, in terms of ML, some theoretical knowledge, in terms of deep learning and stuff like that. So once you have that background covered, then I think the first point of contact should actually be the official documentation. So go to the official documentation. There are guides there that can, help you. There are code labs that you can walk through. Then after the official documentation, then you can now go for maybe mock courses. So maybe you can go like at Udacity, Coursera. You can take these end-to-end mock courses to kind of like solidify what you've actually learned. Then from there, then you can start building hands-on projects. So I think the best way to actually learn these things is to build as you learn. So build as you learn. So build projects, share them with the public, get feedback, and just go for them from there.
And then use code samples, as you said, like share, give back to the community, learn
Yeah.
by doing, go to dev library, link in the description, as
Yeah.
you say on YouTube, to see all the great code samples that people like you have put together. Rising, what is the worst piece of advice you've heard in our industry, in our domain of software development and coding? Anything that
Okay.
anything that you hear and you're rolling your eyes and thinking, "Oh, this is terrible advice." Why people keep on saying this?
The worst piece of advice. Let me see. That's a tough one. But I think the worst piece of advice for me, and this is my personal opinion, would be the fact that you should actually master just a single language when coding. So I feel that you can actually learn more than one language, and you should not actually just stick to a particular language, because if you master just a particular language, I think every problem that you want to solve, you will be trying to do that in that particular language, and sometimes that language might not be the right tool for the job. Okay, so it is good to actually learn multiple languages, although you can have one that you are very very good at, but you should actually learn multiple language, in my opinion. So the idea that you should just be an expert in a single language, it's, to me, that advice, it's kind of bad. Yes, kind of bad. So I wouldn't recommend that. I normally like to tell people that you should learn wide, then go deep. So have an idea of what is out there in terms of languages, in terms of frameworks, in terms of tools, and then you can pick a particular one, very good at it, but you still have ideas of other things in case the need arises for you to do some other stuff. Yeah.
To
So I
ex-
think, yeah, that's my.
to extend your piece of advice, would you say it would make sense to have a client-facing and a server-facing language in your skill set? Like we talked
Definitely.
earlier, right? We talked about Python and JavaScript, which serve different purposes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So you can pick a scripting language to know, pick a backend language, and I think it is actually good if you have an idea, little bit of idea in all these areas. At least learn a little bit of DevOps, a little bit of client, a little bit of front side, a little bit of back side. So kind of like have all these ideas so that you can contribute to discussions, contribute to designing new softwares, because if you have idea in all these areas, you can better build software, you can build better softwares than as opposed to when you just have a single expert knowledge in one particular area or in one particular language.
I think that makes perfect sense. In fact, this is also confirmed by research. There's a very good book that has become a bestseller by, I believe, David Epstein.
Oh, wow.
And it's called Range, How Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. And it goes along the same lines of what you just said, trying to go broad so you can have ideas from different domains, and then you go deeper in one or two or three areas. And that allows you to actually have ideas and to solve problems in a more original way than if you are specializing in just one area.
Yeah, definitely.
Rising, what excites you in terms of piece of technology, of Google Tech, that you want to learn more about or that you're looking forward to in the next few weeks or months? Is there something that you're particularly eager to get better at or that you're waiting for?
Okay, I think for me at the moment, it's actually the old Google Cloud platform. That is actually my new excitement now. So I've been doing lots of experiment and lots of work with it for the past month. And I found out that there are lots of amazing tools on GCP that's like, it just blows my mind. I was last week I was using Cloud Build and Cloud Run and Cloud Functions. Like, these are just like amazing tools that I didn't even realize they were this powerful. So I just started using them like for the past month. And so to me, I want to cover all the GCP products that are out there, so I can build, because I want to move from building just models that are going to sit on the laptop or your computers, as opposed to models that are going to be in production. So we have to think about these cloud environments. And during my research, Google has lots of amazing, tools already out there. So I think my interest for now is actually GCP platform, just for me to grasp all the tools and learn everything that is in there.
Very cool.
It's possible.
I look forward to what you're going to come up with, and maybe you're going to share some new open source projects that you're going to build or contribute to, or blog posts about your journey as you discover more about GCP. Any final few words that you want to share with fellow developers who are going to watch this video? Any last recommendation you'd like to share? Any words of wisdom you'd like to share with us?
Okay, I think the number one piece of advice, or the number one lasting words that I will leave, is that get into open source. Okay, try to build something, try to contribute, try to maintain, try to improve products. I think for me, open source has really been like a way opener for me, because I got my job through open source. I got a lot of exposure through open source. I learned a lot through open source, through putting my work out there. So get into open source, and open source can be in terms of building software, writing blog posts, giving talks, teaching other people. So just put yourself out there more, like in these community areas. It's going to help you personally. It's going to grow the community as a whole and stuff like that. So yeah, I think for me that's like the best advice that I would give to young developers.
I love that. It can be a bit intimidating for someone who's maybe a junior developer who just started to code to get involved into open source. What would be the first baby step that someone could take? How could you select, let's say, an open source project on GitHub or other platforms where you could get started? What would be your very practical advice, a very practical tip, so they can feel, yes, I can do it, even though I'm a beginner or I'm a junior developer?
Okay. Yeah. So basically, I like to say that if you want to start out, you should definitely start out with an open source library that you have used a lot and that you love. Okay, because if you love a software, if you love a piece of software and you've used it a lot, you have an idea of ways to improve the product, of ways to contribute. So once you have found out that particular software or that particular open source library that you love and you want to contribute, so you found out an error, you can definitely go to the issues page, search through the issues if it is already existing. If it is not existing, you can open an issue. But if you don't have an idea of what you want to contribute, you can actually, go over the existing issues that people have created. So most of them have tags. Like if you are a beginner, you can see something like a good first issue. They'll tag those issues as good first, meaning a beginner can actually pick them up and, work on them. So once you have identified this issue, you can reach out to the maintainers. I think most maintainers actually welcome contributions. Personally, for me, I love when people contribute, even if it's the smallest of stuff, even if it's a typo, send it in. I'm very, very excited to see it. It means that someone wants to actually be a part of this whole ecosystem. So you can, if you find out any error, even if it's a typo, you can even start by contributing to the documentation. I think that's like one of the simplest way to contribute. Contribute to documentation, add more tutorials, fix typos. Then from there, you can move on to more complex contributions like adding new features or fixing bugs, stuff like that. So, but to summarize the steps that you need to take, find out a software that you love and you've used a lot. Look for issues on that software that you want to fix, and reach out to the maintainers, or then write your solution, send in a PR.
Perfect. Thanks for the superb summary and the very practical recommendation. You can start super small, even just with correcting typos or fixing or adding to documentation. Love that. Rising, thank you so much for spending some time with me to share a little bit about you and your journey.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Bye-bye.